The first time my boss humiliated me publicly, he used a laser pointer. Seriously. Little red dot bouncing across a spreadsheet while 30 people sat around a glass conference table pretending not to enjoy it. Can someone explain, he said slowly, why Owen's forecasting model looks like it was assembled during a hostage situation? Couple people laughed. Not loudly. Corporate laughter is softer than that. More careful. Designed to maintain deniability later. I remember sitting there in my wrinkled blue shirt holding a pen so tightly my fingers hurt while Carson Bell, the regional operations director and self-appointed king of the building, paced around the presentation screen like a guy auditioning to play arrogance professionally. And the crazy part? My numbers were right. That mattered later. At the time though, Carson didn't care about accuracy. He cared about dominance. Different skill set entirely. Maybe analytics just isn't your lane, he added casually. There it was. The line designed to stick. And yeah, it did. Not because I believed him. Because I realized everybody else in that room needed to pretend he was right to survive working there. I just nodded like, sure, whatever. Then updated my spreadsheet while the meeting continued. That became my specialty at Merrill Logistics, surviving embarrassment quietly enough that people underestimated how much I noticed. Carson loved an audience. Loved it. He corrected people publicly. Interrupted constantly. Used phrases like, high performers, the way medieval kings probably used swords. Meanwhile I was the operations analyst nobody really paid attention to. Quiet guy in the corner. Good with systems. Forgettable shoes. Perfect. See, my father used to tell me something when I was younger. The loudest person in a room usually mistakes attention for respect. Took me years to understand that. At Merrow, Carson got attention everywhere he went. Corner office. Reserved parking. Executives laughing too hard at mediocre jokes. But respect? Different story. People feared him. That's not the same thing. The humiliation pattern escalated slowly over 4 years. He'd accidentally leave me off important emails. Credit my work to senior staff. Once introduced me to visiting executives as our spreadsheet monk. Another time he told a room full of managers, Owen's great at details because ambition hasn't distracted him yet. That one almost impressed me. Elegant insult. My ally through all this was Celia Rowe from compliance. Sharp eyes. Sharp mind. One of the few people in the building who spoke less than I did. We started grabbing coffee during late inventory audits because both of us hated performative networking events. One night after Carson embarrassed me during a budget review, she asked quietly, "How long are you planning to let him do this? Until he mistakes comfort for invincibility." She blinked once. That sounded mildly terrifying. Probably. Thing is, I wasn't passive. People confuse silence with passivity all the time. While Carson focused on visibility, I focused on infrastructure. Vendor systems. Regional routing inefficiencies. Labor forecasting. Quiet operational weaknesses nobody glamorous wanted to touch. Turns out companies are mostly held together by people executives forget to thank. Over time I became the unofficial fixer for problems nobody could solve cleanly. Warehouse losses in Kansas City? Call Owen. Scheduling collapse in Phoenix? Owen handled it. Vendor fraud risk in Memphis? Already flagged. Carson took credit for most of it publicly. I let him. Because patience is expensive emotionally, but useful strategically. Then came the merger. That's when everything shifted. Merrill Logistics got acquired by a private investment group out of Chicago. New executives. New audits. New performance reviews. And suddenly all the invisible systems people mattered. Carson handled this development horribly. Guy thought he could charm spreadsheets. During transition meetings he talked constantly about leadership culture, while fumbling operational questions he should have known cold. I noticed the new ownership team noticing too. Especially one executive named Helena Voss. Calm woman. Minimal words. The kind of person who looked through conversations instead of at them. One afternoon she stopped by my desk unexpectedly. "No one seems able to explain why the Midwest recovery metric stabilized last quarter," she said. "I fixed the routing conflict." "How?" I explained. She listened quietly for almost 10 minutes without interrupting. That alone felt unusual. At the end she asked, "Why wasn't this presented centrally?" I looked toward Carson's office. She followed my eyes. And smiled slightly. Oh. That's when I knew, this was gonna get messy. Over the next 3 months Helena kept pulling me into meetings Carson wasn't invited to. Not dramatic meetings either. Real ones. Operational strategy. Acquisition integration. Labor retention modeling. The stuff that actually determines whether companies survive. Meanwhile Carson got louder. Classic mistake. Arrogant people interpret shifting power as temporary inconvenience right until the floor disappears underneath them. The trigger came during the annual leadership summit in Denver. Big hotel ballroom. Giant projection screens. Overpriced salmon. Executives pretending exhaustion was prestige. Carson absolutely loved those events because they rewarded performance over substance. At one point during a panel discussion, Helena asked about operational failures during the acquisition transition. Carson immediately grabbed the microphone. I had to personally stabilize several departments after analytical forecasting errors created staffing inconsistencies. Then he glanced directly at me. Publicly. Again. Same little smile. Same performance. Couple executives turned toward me sympathetically like they already knew the script. But this time something was different. Helena asked calmly, "Which forecasting errors specifically?" Carson hesitated. Tiny pause. Then he started improvising. Never improvise around people who know the numbers. I watched Helena's expression flatten slowly while Carson kept talking himself deeper into a hole. Wrong percentages. Incorrect labor projections. Misstated recovery costs. And the more nervous he got, the more arrogant his tone became. Guy thought confidence could substitute for competence indefinitely. Finally Helena interrupted quietly. "That's interesting." Silence. Then she turned toward me. "Owen, would you mind pulling up the original reports?" The ballroom changed temperature instantly. I connected my laptop calmly to the projector and opened archived operational records. Time stamps. Correction logs. Forecast recovery models. Every fix. Every escalation. Every solution. My name attached quietly to all of it. No drama. Just documentation. Corporate downfall is rarely explosive. Usually it's administrative. Carson tried interrupting twice. Helena shut him down both times with a raised hand. The room became painfully still once executives realized what they were actually looking at. An operations director publicly taking credit for years of work he barely understood. And worse? There were email records. Lots of them. Turns out humiliating detail-oriented people repeatedly is a dangerous long-term strategy. The investigation afterward moved fast. Not because anybody cared about my feelings. Corporations don't operate on justice. They operate on liability. Carson got removed during restructuring review 6 weeks later. Officially it was framed as leadership misalignment. Funny phrase. Means the same thing as, we finally checked. And me? I got promoted into regional operational oversight under Helena's division. Higher salary. Equity package. Real authority. But honestly, the money mattered less than the quiet. No more meetings designed as public executions. No more careful fake smiles after humiliation. No more shrinking myself professionally so insecure people could feel tall. About 8 months later, I walked past payroll review offices and saw Carson sitting inside a temporary consulting cubicle reviewing compliance paperwork. Contract role. Limited term. He looked up slowly when he saw me. Older somehow. Smaller too. Not physically. Structurally. I signed the authorization packet approving consultant allocations that afternoon. Including his. And the strange thing? I didn't feel triumphant. Just clear. Because eventually I realized Carson's biggest mistake wasn't humiliating me. It was assuming the quiet person in the room wasn't also the one quietly learning how everything actually worked.